how do you think about words? Why do you think about words?
Yeah, word choice is so tricky, but it matters so much. And often words have differing perceptions or connotations, whether we realize it or not. And in marketing, we need to understand what those complexities are in order to execute communications effectively. Yeah, I don't know that I had thought a ton about the nuance of words until you and I really started going down this path, Cole, but it was a fascinating sort of look back and reflection on what I do and why as far as word choice.
Welcome to the Backcountry Marketing Podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Becky Marcelliano. She is the Senior Access and Stewardship Marketing Manager over at Onyx Maps. Becky, how are you?
Doing great, Cole. Thanks. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to having you on the show again. I had to go back and look, but you were on the show way back in the day. Season 1, episode 21, as a matter of fact.
Awesome. Yeah, gosh, that feels like eons ago, but always great to connect and share some stories through backcountry marketing. So thanks for having me again.
Well, if folks are interested to learn a little bit more about your story and your background, I'd suggest people go back and listen to that early episode. I do apologize. Episode 21, we were definitely figuring out some of the kinks. I was probably rough. Becky, you were amazing. But Becky, today we're going to be talking about a fun conversation. It's kind of a big topic, but it's a topic that we kind of both arrived at as we were connecting a few weeks ago. We're going to be talking about words and word choice in marketing. And we'll kind of dive into what we mean by that. But I guess to kind of kick us off, Becky, I'd love to know from you, is there a difference between speaking and listening versus communicating?
Yeah, that is a great question. Speaking and listening, I think in our daily lives, we do it much more casually and more innately. And we use our human intuition to rattle off the things that we want to say and learn through listening to engage in conversation. Whereas communication, at least from a marketing perspective, it needs to be a little bit more formal and a little bit more sharp in order to really tap into and tune into exactly what you're trying to say and why you're trying to say it and who you're trying to say it to.
Interesting. Yes, I was thinking about it. Speaking and listening sounds like I'm listening to you right now. I'm speaking to you right now. And while you might be hearing what I'm saying, are we communicating? Because I think communication is almost like I understand and I am reciprocating what you're saying and I'm acknowledging what you're saying and then responding to it. But I think sometimes speaking and listening could just be very passive, and maybe communication is the actual art of conversing with someone.
Interesting. Another great way to spin it.
I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Well, let's back up a little bit. Becky, could you kind of break down what your role is at Onyx? Maybe give us a little background on Onyx and what is your role? What do you do?
Yeah, so Onyx is a mapping and navigation company with desktop and mobile apps built for recreationists of many types. We got started in the hunting space and then moved into off-road, both snow and dirt, and then into the backcountry space. So that those products are designed for hikers, backpackers, backcountry skiers, and so on. And Onyx has an incredible depth of data of all sorts. Our maps are built with many purpose-built layers that all work together. And we're often known for our parcel data on land ownership, both public and private. So for example, hunters know exactly where they stand when they're wandering around out there in the woods or the mountains, or say someone's looking for a campsite and wants to know exactly what the federal legal designation of that land is to know if they can camp there legally. As you said earlier, I'm the Senior Access and Stewardship Marketing Manager at Onyx Maps, and I work across all three of what we call our verticals: hunt, off-road, and backcountry. And I sit on our brand team, and my role is to lead initiatives and storytelling that are purpose-driven based on what we care most about as a brand, which is access and stewardship. Access meaning how to protect and conserve the physical and legal access to the public lands we all love. And stewardship meaning the more of that human responsibility of using these lands. Essentially, how do we get out there safely, responsibly, and sustainably? And my job encompasses a lot of things like running campaigns or crafting stories, building partnerships, hosting events, giving grants. And I think and I work across all channels and many different outdoor audience segments. And at the end of the day, my work is designed to do good work in the world, and as well as build brand love and provide meaningful touch points through the funnel and drive retention for the long run.
I'm curious, as you were kind of thinking about this episode and this idea of words and how we use them and what they mean, why is this something we even arrived at? How do you think about words? Why do you think about words?
Yeah, word choice is so tricky, but it matters so much. And often words have differing perceptions or connotations, whether we realize it or not. And in marketing, we need to understand what those complexities are in order to execute communications effectively. So, I don't know that I had thought a ton about the nuance of words until you and I really started going down this path, Cole. But it was a fascinating sort of look back and reflection on what I do and why as far as word choice. So I'm excited to dive in more.
I was trying to think about what is an example in my own personal experience where I've experienced this dichotomy. And it was a few years ago, I was thinking about the words conservation and environmentalism, and I was using them interchangeably in sentences. And it wasn't until I stopped and thought, oh, is there a difference between these two words? And I Googled it and then found out, oh, there is a difference. And there actually is quite a large difference, that I then realized something that I thought was very similar, which they are similar, but they have different applications, or they're used differently in the world. Those two words are very different. And if you use those words in different user groups or with different people, they might respond differently based on what they associate the meaning of those words with. And that's what I think when I realized, oh, the words that we use are actually very important, which sounds super simple to say, but it has such a profound meaning.
Yeah, it really does. And that's a great example that you gave, and I can dive into a similar one at Onyx. But my work at Onyx is really what heightened my awareness to the incredibly keen importance of words in marketing, and created an opportunity for me to start thinking in new ways. And I started building campaigns about access and stewardship, and they had to land with a variety of outdoor user groups, and I kept getting stumped on how to do it. So one example that we think and use a lot is the word stewardship. It's a great example. We can kind of dive in there. But many human-powered recreationists have a fairly strong grasp of what the word stewardship means. They might know the leave no trace principles, or at least understand that a steward is one who respects the land. The word stewardship is also used in marketing campaigns and messaging all over the place these days, thankfully, because our world needs it. But chances are anyone who is tuning into marketing from various outdoor brands has heard the prompts to be a responsible recreator out there. But because my work at Onyx spans to off-roaders and hunters as well as human-powered folks, we think about like the word stewardship in hunting. It's way less of a thing. And it's not that a hunter doesn't know what a steward is, although sometimes they might describe it differently. The discrepancy here more so lies in the heritage of hunting and what they know to be good practices in their sport. The word conservation is the word that rings way more authentically with hunters, whether that's conservation of wildlife populations, conservation of the habitat in which those creatures live, and conservation of access to the lands where hunters can hunt. So is one word better than the other? Stewardship or conservation or environmentalism? I don't think one's better. They're just nuanced, and they mean slightly different things to different people.
Yeah. So in that example, why is that nuance important? I guess why even give this any thought? Why not just use words interchangeably as you're speaking? Because Onyx, as you said, like you guys speak to a wide variety of users. You've got hikers and backpackers, you've got off-roaders, you've got hunters. Why is this important?
Yeah, I think it goes back to how do we make the message that we have land in the best way. As a marketer, and if I'm promoting responsible behavior to our customers to help solve that big kind of recreational issue of today, it's on me to understand what will resonate best to fire them up, to get them to acknowledge that their actions matter, and to give them a CTA that they want to stand proudly behind. And it's not that a backcountry skier doesn't care about wildlife, and it's not that a hunter doesn't care about something like trash on the trail, but but think about it. We have to represent with like very crystal clear authenticity so that it resonates. We have tiny little moments to make a difference with our marketing, and we have maybe just one chance today to make a difference in the world and to build brand loyalty and to ultimately nudge that buy button. So we just have to understand the nuances of passion, like deep within the audiences that we're speaking to know exactly how to pull on those heartstrings.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the hunter example, they might respond better to conservation versus stewardship. Why is stewardship a word that might not, that a hunter might not associate with as closely as conservation? Like what about the act of hunting and the heritage of hunting leads to that differentiation in word choice?
That's so interesting to think about. And I don't know that I have a great answer to like the root origin of why human powered sports went more the stewardship realm and conservation. Conservation is so deep rooted in the culture and the language and the philanthropy to preserve hunting. And that stems back so many generations. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, gosh, it could even be, if you think about what each of those user groups care most about, it could stem from that, the conservation of wildlife versus more of a sustainability or global protection. Climate change is often, like, those words are often more used in the human powered space than in the hook and bullet space. So yeah, maybe it goes back to like where the origin of what people care about most in order to protect the sports they love. But I don't know. That's just a hypothesis.
Well, that makes sense. Seems like a sound theory, at least. Do you feel like if you asked a hunter and a hiker what is conservation and what is stewardship, you'd get two different responses?
I do. I think everyone has a little bit of a different interpretation of what those words mean. So I think it would be natural to have a lot of variety in those answers, even within the same user group. They're big words, it's like they encompass a lot of things, even within conservation. Like I listed, it could be conservation of wildlife or land or access. And stewardship is so many things too. It's like stewardship of the people and the communities that make up our outdoor recreation world, or the indigenous people that still live on the lands today that we get to travel to, or stewardship of the land itself, So there's a lot of rich depth to those words. So I think naturally, if you were to ask someone those questions, they'd probably give you some element of that maybe came first to mind, or something that they cared about most within that broader scope.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I wonder then, like in a position where you're at, where you've got, like, how do you then choose what word to use? Because everyone has a different, slightly differently. And as a brand, how do you sort through which words to use versus others? Because it seems like you could go down a rabbit hole forever trying to find the right word to use in a particular messaging.
Yeah, a lot of rabbit holing happens, but I think at the end of the day, it's like, how well do you know your customer, and we have tried to put the word stewardship and responsible recreation, ethics and tactics in front of the hunting consumer. And has it worked? I think so, to some degree. But then that kind of begs the question of, how much do we as a brand force a new word in a very old legacy culture of hunting, or whether we should just stick with a word like conservation that they all know and love and value and respect. That's a tough question to ask. I think we've dabbled with it, and I think it's important for all recreators to really think about what stewardship looks like and what it means to be one in today's landscape. But yeah, I think it just sort of goes back to like, how well do you know your customer and what words are going to truly resonate with them the best, so that they actually care enough to do something.
Okay, so let's just run a little live experiment here. I'm curious, what words resonate with the hunting category, and what words resonate with the human-powered athletic sports? Like, if you just had to kind of give 5 or 7 words that resonate with each, but maybe mean different things to each other, I'm curious what you think of.
Yeah, like words that are very much a part of the hunting culture are words like heritage and legacy, and land access and conservation, wildlife preservation, ecosystem health, I think is another one that actually could cross over to both. So then segueing into more of the human-powered realm, I think sustainability is a big one. Stewardship falls in that realm. Climate health, ecosystem, landscapes.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at your list here, and if you boiled them down and you asked someone who wasn't in the outdoor industry, they all basically mean the same thing, but they have very, very specific nuance to your point about understanding your audience. So as you're putting together a campaign, like how much effort do you put into finding the right word? Are you granular enough where you're putting together a tagline or a CTA and you're swapping 5 or 6 words into it just to try to find the right one?
Yes, for sure. We obsess words so much. I mean, the amount of times I pull up the thesaurus at work is probably embarrassing, but I think it's important to really obsess those things and make sure we get it right. As like deep and epic as the English language is, there's still times where I'm like, I'm not sure that there's a right word in our language to exactly capture what I'm trying to say. And that's really interesting. And it poses fascinating challenges. And it's a love-hate for me, for sure, that whole process.
That makes me think about like different languages and how different languages have different meanings as well. And I'm not an expert on that and I don't understand it, but I know that certain languages have, you change a syllable or you change a letter and it changes the entire meaning or it changes the significance of the meaning. And it makes me wonder sometimes if we need to rethink the English language.
Yes, that's like a whole nother can of worms, but yeah, in the decade before coming to Onyx, I worked for European mostly human powered brands in the outdoor space. And the biggest challenge there was like translation issues coming from European languages of some sort to English. And that was a fascinating marketing problem to solve, where it's like, wow, that one didn't quite translate in the way that was intended, So then it's like working through those shifts just to make sure that it landed quite right for the consumer. But yeah, my time at Onyx has posed a different level of understanding of words once you get into the word nuance when you're talking about different user groups and how they interpret things.
You mentioned earlier that one of the questions you're asking yourself is, like, as a brand, how much do we place emphasis on a word versus another? And do we try to take a word and integrate it into a different community, like the stewardship word? How do you think about that question? What runs through your mind as you're trying to evaluate? I don't want to say like forcing a word on a community, but to some degree, that's kind of what it sounds like you're contemplating.
A little bit, yes. And I think the question is, as a brand, at what point do you push for disruption and change? And which point do you nail the message in a way that is already going to be relatable and speak to something that that customer is passionate about? And that's a fine line. When do you disrupt and when do you really just know that you're going to nail it? I think there's room for both in marketing, and it's assessing what's right at the time and what change you're trying to create and what's at stake. Like sometimes the world needs us all to take risks, and as marketers, we have that opportunity to push those edges.
Are there any examples that you can think of in the industry as a whole where you've seen that play out?
I don't know if at Onyx we have any great example of where we've been completely disruptive with words, aside from trying to integrate a word like stewardship more into the hunting or off-roading community. But something that Onyx does take pride in doing is trying to find commonalities between user groups and really celebrate where we're actually aligned or where we're actually more alike than we are different. We live in a very polarizing world today, as we all know, and that can be really challenging for brands like Onyx and others in a similar realm of serving such a wide breadth of recreationists. But we really try to celebrate the good that each user group brings to the table, and celebrate that we're perhaps in many cases more aligned than we are just completely on opposite ends of the spectrum. We did a study last year and found that 96% of outdoor recreation participants feel it's important to preserve and maintain public lands, resources, and recreational access. And then we also polled a more general American audience, including those that don't necessarily recreate outside, and 85% said that they also value these things. That is a staggering and extremely unifying American belief. So really fun fact that like we all care about these places, and we're all just trying to get out there and go farther. But, you know, then you get into like access policy and things like that where things get more polarizing. But if you take it right back to the beginning of we're all just looking for these wide open spaces that we can go explore and unwind and immerse in the beauty of our landscapes, like that is a very unifying American dream.
Yeah. Well, right. It's America's greatest idea as it's coined, huh?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So do you see that as part of the role? Like, does Onyx see its role as a brand to help be a unifying force amongst all these user groups? Like you're in the pocket of all these different types of people. And do you see the brand as a force for good to try to rally all these folks to a common goal?
Yeah, we do. It's not everything we do, because we all know that getting really sharp on exactly who you're talking to and why is also extremely important. But as Onyx maps the parent brand, we do try to put initiatives together or campaigning or comms that do span the gamut and are designed to help break down some of these barriers to get people to just be a little bit more understanding and compassionate of each other. Yeah, for example, we try to highlight what different user groups actually bring to the table that serve everyone. For example, the Robert Pittman tax, which is a tax on ammo and hunting equipment. All of that money goes back to conservation of our public lands. And who's using those public lands? Everyone. We all are, right? But that is a tax that only hunters are actually paying. And it's an incredible amount of money that is going towards something that all user groups are benefiting from and really care about. So that is something like huge kudos to the hunting industry for actually really dumping all of that money back into a good place. Something that we're seeing from off-roaders that's really incredible today is there's various groups around the country that are leading these large macro cleanups on our public lands. And unfortunately, we've all probably seen it, that campsite that's just like has dumped many people have dumped massive amounts of trash on these lands. Or sometimes there's that broken down RV or that boat that's like 29 miles into the forest. They're like, how the heck did this thing get here? And why did somebody dump it there? And nobody knows. But the reality is like somebody needs to haul that out. And the motorized community has the rigs and the trailers and the 4x4 capabilities to get way deeper into these public lands and use the equipment that's more readily at their fingertips to haul out big items and massive amounts of trash. Something that maybe a human-powered person just doesn't have the capabilities of doing, you know? And so that is something that the off-road community is providing as a massive benefit to all. So you have to think about like who has what levers and really celebrating those levers as they're giving back to the places we love.
Yeah. So in that example where you're trying to bring folks together, whether for a cleanup day or a conference or a symposium where people are all sharing stories from these different user groups, like coming back to the idea of words, if you're bringing all of your user groups together, are you being as granular about your word choice also and trying to find words that resonate with everyone? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for both, right? If you're talking about, hey, you're trying to reach more of a mainstream audience, top of funnel for user acquisition tactics or something like that, you're going to have to go a little bit more broad in that messaging that's going to be able to capture more of that like mass audience. But if I'm running a campaign that's specifically for off-roaders on an access issue in Escalante, like I better be really sharp on exactly what I'm using to get them to have their ears perk up and say, how can I participate in the solution?
Let's go there. How does language divide us?
So when you're talking about users of so many different recreation types, they all have different objectives. They call different cultures home. They vote differently. They need different gear, seek access differently, and ultimately stand up for different things. So of course they speak differently too in a lot of cases. And the junction really gets interesting when word choice becomes polarizing between user groups in recreational access policy. For example, the word wilderness has different meanings. Wilderness often has a broad meaning of being in the wild or in the backcountry, and it represents these lovely places that we like to go to explore or immerse in our landscapes, and so on. And it's dreamy, and it's all over branding today. We've all seen it, like built for the wild, Yeti claims, or a Land Rover slogan, all the most dominant species start out in the wilderness, or Jackson Hole's very famous Stay Wild campaign to promote responsible tourism. So it seems that wilderness, it's a good thing, an aspirational place, right? But there is also then capital W wilderness, the land designation, which is managed by the Forest Service. And there's 803 wilderness areas in America today. And whether this is a good thing depends on who you ask. And like this is the junction or the crux. Because the use of motorized or mechanized equipment is prohibited in wilderness areas. And this includes vehicles, OHVs, motorboats, and even bicycles. So if I'm an off-roader or a mountain biker and I want to explore these lands, I can't. And that doesn't mean that those users don't appreciate or value preserved lands, but when it really comes down to policy and travel management plans that determine who can go there, it matters greatly. So that mountain biker might vote against land becoming a wilderness area so that they can maintain their access. And this is the delicate balance with land management and recreational access policy today. But thankfully, going back to that commonality between everyone, the things that unify us are we all care about lands in the first place, and wanting to protect them. Things just get really sticky when we talk about who the heck is allowed to go there and on what type of method or vehicle.
Yeah, I mean the wilderness conversation is like worthy of its own podcast because there's a lot there for sure. Even like you brought up mountain bikers, and even on sanctioned trails where mountain bikers are allowed to ride, there's now becoming this divisive issue of e-bikes versus traditional bikes. And like the phrase "earn your turn" is popular in mountain biking. Well, that has a very different meaning if you're an e-biker, and I think sometimes it's used kind of in a negative way towards e-bikers. And so there's this phrase that like is kind of honored amongst the traditional mountain biker, but now an e-biker might have interpreted that differently, or it's used kind of as a slander for someone, which is just kind of fascinating to evaluate how we react to someone who probably would get along with very well, but because they ride a different type of bike, we have trouble getting past that.
Yeah, e-bikes it's a really sticky topic today, and there's a lot of varying opinions on the matter. Most land managers do consider e-bikes motorized, and so they kind of fit into that category. And is that fair or not? I don't know. I see why they're doing it that way, but if I'm an e-biker and that is my tool that I need to actually get out there and I am all about that, doesn't really, it's not hurting me any if they're using that as an accessibility tool. But as far as laws and rules and where can they go and access issues, they're usually considered a motorized vehicle. And that can pose a lot of issues and opinions as far as where people can go.
I mean, see, that's where it feels like all of this stuff, like language could unite us, because as you said earlier, 96% of the industry wants to protect public lands. 85% of the general population wants to protect public lands. So we're all in the same boat, but we just get caught in like the middle of these small arguments and disagreements.
Yeah, I think there's I think there's a lot of words that are common as well, you know, or at least have a commonly good connotation. Even words like stewardship and words like conservation, kind of going back to those two. I think we'd be hard pressed to find somebody that's like conservation, no thanks, or stewardship, I don't believe in it, you know? So I think at least no matter what word you're using or how exactly you bring that to life on your own adventures, I think it comes down to that common goal of keeping our lands healthy and preserved and protected for the next generations to come. I think it all kind of goes back to that same like innate human love of being outside and the feelings that we get when we're out there. And that's what fires us up to be a steward or to be a conservationist or an environmentalist or whatever you want to call yourself. I think it's all really good. And that definitely deserves to be a really large, loud, and proud celebration amongst all of us.
Because humans, I don't know if we enjoy conflict, but we seem to find conflict easily. Are we looking for ways to differentiate amongst ourselves, and choosing things like words to kind of squabble over is just a way to do it?
Gosh, I think unfortunately there's a lot of squabbling happening in America today. I don't know. I'm not trying to say it's good that there's polarizing thoughts by any means, but it makes sense when you think about what everybody is trying to keep for themselves. And if that's access to the places that we like, love, and cherish most, it makes sense why people get fired up, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I don't have any of the answers, that's for sure. You mentioned the word access, and that's another word that seems very intriguing because there's a lot of different ways you can slice that word. Kind of break that down. How do you see that being interpreted in your world?
Yeah, great question. This is another doozy of a word, or fascinatingly complex word. What the heck does access mean in the world of recreation? So there's the definition that states the legal and physical allowance to go to a place. And then there's the intersection of where access turns into accessibility when you talk about barriers that are other than physical or legal, such as like proximity to public land, monetary barriers, know-how, gear. And in those cases, access is more figurative, as in like a "do I belong here? Can I go?" type of messaging. At Onyx, the access work that we do primarily aligns with the physical and legal allowance to a place. That's what we really lean on within our access and stewardship program. But then things get complicated because, of course, at Onyx, we care about and support access and accessibility topics beyond issues such as, am I allowed to camp here? And when we tell those stories and work with our DEI committee to help fund and resource those types of organizations, we just have to use different language that speaks appropriately to those topics to avoid confusion, just so that people know when Onyx talks about access, it means holistically this, but then we can actually care about other things beyond that and tell those more micro stories. But then you can see the importance of defining like keywords used in your branding. At Onyx, we have spent hours agonizing over what access and stewardship mean to Onyx. Like, those are our two pillars of this purpose-driven program that we have built within our brand. But the definitions that we have written for access and stewardship are definitely not the same definitions that would show up in Merriam-Webster's, right? They're ours. Like, what do those two words mean to us as Onyx, not to the entire world as a whole, or how a dictionary might define them. And then these definitions that we have written, they anchor all of the work that we do within our access and stewardship program. And then because we have a lot of those sharp definitions, it alleviates questions internally. It provides guardrails for us and provides us something to really rally around as an entire company that everyone can proudly buy into, support, share, and promote.
Can a brand reach a point where a word like access becomes synonymous with Onyx, or environmentalism is synonymous with Patagonia? Like, How do you achieve that? How does a brand achieve that level of that they become the synonym for something else?
I think it takes doing the right work for a long duration of time to build that link in trust and acknowledgement that you are a leader in that space. I think a brand like Patagonia has earned that claim as far as being an environmentalist, like that they know exactly who they are and what they stand for. And for decades, they have been doing the work to drive that mission forward. I think for Access and Onyx, despite us only being around for a decade and a half or so, I think there's a lot of people that do very much link Onyx to Access. So we're lucky because we kind of started that from the very beginning of our brand. It was something that our founder cared a lot about and started doing work in from the beginning. And so it was rooted, and now it's like a part of our DNA, and especially our hunting community does really associate us with that mission. But I think it takes time. Even in Onyx's world, it has taken a decade and a half for people to really see that and trust that and know that that is truly something that we not only stand for in words, but also stand for in how we spend our resourcing and where we put our dollars, and how we influence policy and all of those things.
Earlier, we were sharing some images in an email chain where the image that we were seeing like completely missed the mark. It didn't connect. It wasn't authentic to the audience. And those images got me thinking about like what happens when words miss the mark, when they aren't speaking to the audience. And there's two images. One was a mountain biker. It was like a Toyota ad, and it was this terrible shot of a mountain biker riding a Walmart bike in like the totally wrong kit. And nothing about it speaked true. And the mountain bike community completely picked it apart and roasted the post. And you shared a photo of a climber who was, I don't know what they were doing, but they were not climbing. And I know those are photos and not words, but what happens when content, photos or words, get published on behalf of a brand and something like that happens, which it's kind of almost catastrophic for the brand in terms of their connection to a very specific endemic audience.
Yeah, in both of those cases, I think it's a big diss on both the brand putting out the ad and the community that they completely portrayed incorrectly, right? I mean, in the Toyota ad, gosh, I'm a Toyota owner and I'm like, come on, and if I'm also a mountain biker and I'm like, come on. So, it's like a double whammy because the brand just didn't get it right. So I think you can really degrade your credibility overall, but when you don't quite get those things right. And you think about like agencies being hired to do this work, and maybe there wasn't someone close enough within the brand to help oversee. I don't know. That seems like, how does that even happen? But clearly it happens sometimes. Whoever was overseeing the execution of those visuals just didn't have a good finger on the pulse, and that can be a really bad moment for your brand.
Well, that's why you're at Onyx and you're thinking about this stuff. I feel like if I was you, I would kind of drive myself up the wall thinking about these ideas. Yeah,
there's always so many ideas to think about, and I think it always goes back for me and our team to, we're marketers, and at the end of the day, we hope we have some people signing up or taking a trial of our apps and ultimately converting, because all of that revenue goes back into our Access and Stewardship program. It enables us to do more and to give more. But beyond conversion, for me, it's super important to do what's right for the world and to really be in tune with what our outdoor communities need today and what our open spaces need today, and how do we as a brand use the levers that we have at our fingertips to actually do the right thing and to actually make a difference. So that's kind of my first and foremost. If conversions come later, if I'm a good marketer and my team is doing the right thing, people will see that and slowly over time build that loyalty and really want to be a part of what we're doing. And I think that's where like long lead time brand building comes from the work that we do now. We just have to be patient and continue to take the high road over and over again.
Yeah. No, well said. Becky, we've talked about a lot. Is there anything that we haven't talked about or anything that you want to leave our audience with as we sign off here?
Another fun word that has a different meaning to different user groups is the word trail. A trail to a hiker is a nice single track, but a trail to an off-roader is a dirt double track suited for a motorized rig. That's something that I kind of learned when I came to Onyx, is that off-roaders call driving down an off-road trail, they're going for a trail run is the lingo.
But, interesting.
Right, like they sure as heck aren't like running with their own two legs, but they're like going out for a trail run. But to a human-powered user, they're like, what do you mean? So anyway, even something like that, like trails and running trails can have a completely different meaning to different user groups.
Yeah, no, that is fun. So with your time at Onyx, I guess, what have you learned? Why are words so important?
Yeah, I think overall, if I could sum it up, knowing your audience is really critical. Knowing what they care about is essential, and understanding what inspires them to actually do something is the ultimate goal. Humans are incredibly smart and intuitive, and as marketers, we have to cleverly and strategically match that in order to win their engagement and their loyalty.
Yeah, well said. Becky, on this show, I love to ask questions. Our audience loves to ask questions. And as we sign off here, what questions are you asking yourself, either around this topic or something completely unrelated? What questions are you pondering these days?
Yeah, one question that I'm pondering is, we've talked a lot about it today, but in today's polarizing world, is finding the perfect word for everyone even possible? And does it need to be? Like, as a brand, at what point do we really make a stand or make a choice one way or another? Or do we really aim for that like perfect sweet spot? Maybe there's a time and a place.
A thing?
Yeah, is that a thing?
Yeah, interesting. Well, Becky, if folks want to respond to your question and have any ideas, where can they go to find you?
Yeah, I would love that. You can find me on LinkedIn at Becky Marcelliano or on Instagram at RJ Marcelliano, and would love to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. You've definitely given me a lot to think about. I'm going to think about this question for the rest of the day and maybe the rest of the week. But yeah, is it possible to find the right word? My immediate thought is it seems like no, but maybe there's a way that it could all line up. But Becky, thanks for taking the time to share some of these thoughts, share your ideas, and share just some of the things that you're learning, because it's fascinating. Like, to get to this granular level of the nuance of words, I think isn't something that I've thought a lot about recently, but you've definitely changed my perspective on the words that we use. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I've learned a lot lately, and it's like an endless journey of learning, exploration, making mistakes, and trying again. So it's a wild world, but thanks for the chat today. It was really fun.
All right. Well, hope you have a great rest of your day. And who knows, maybe we'll check in a couple years or sooner for episode number 3 on the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cole.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.